The sun was setting behind the hills of Veranda, painting the sky in deep shades of orange and gold. Evening birds called from the trees, and the scent of roasted maize drifted through the air. It was one of those peaceful nights that made the small town feel like it was holding its breath, quiet, calm, almost sacred. In a modest house at the edge of the village, Emma wiped her hands on her apron. The day's work was done. Her small provision shop, built beside her home, was finally locked for the night. She moved slowly, not from age, but from the weight of many days lived alone. Since her husband's death 5 years ago, Emma had learned how to do everything by herself. Fixing shelves, carrying heavy bags of rice, counting coins late into the night. She did it all without complaint. Her teenage daughter, Zena, helped where she could, but Emma carried most of the burden. Inside their small home, a single bulb flickered. The power was unstable, as always. Emma looked over at Zena, already fast asleep under a thin blanket. The sound of crickets filled the night. Emma sighed softly. "Tomorrow will be better," she whispered to herself, the same words she'd spoken every night for years. Just as she reached to close the window, she heard it, a faint rustle outside. At first, she thought it was just the wind brushing against the veranda. But then came a heavier sound, footsteps. Slow, careful. Her heart skipped. She froze. She turned off the light quickly, her eyes darting toward the doorway. Silence. Then another sound, the low scrape of something against the floorboards outside. Emma's breath caught in her throat. The world outside was dark, lit only by a half-moon. The sound came again. Curiosity and fear wrestled within her chest. She reached for the small kerosene lamp on her table, lit it with trembling fingers, and stepped toward the door. The hinges creaked as she opened it just a little, enough to see a figure lying motionless on her veranda. For a moment, she couldn't move. A man, tall, dusty, his clothes torn and stained with red dust, was curled up beside her wooden chair. He was barefoot, and beside him lay a small cloth bundle, tied tightly. His face was hidden, pressed against his arm as he slept. Emma's heart raced. Who was he? What did he want here? She thought of waking him, or shouting for help. But something stopped her. Even through his doubt and exhaustion, she saw something in him, not menace, but pain. His breathing was steady. His body trembled lightly, as if from cold or fear. She stepped closer, holding the lamp higher. There was a scar across his arm, old, faded, and his hands were rough, the kind that had known hard work. Emma's fears softened into hesitation. "What are you doing, Emma?" she whispered to herself. "You have a child in there. You can't risk it." Still, something in her heart, something stronger than fear, whispered otherwise. She looked at the man one last time, sighed deeply, and lowered the lamp. "Maybe he just needed a place to rest," she murmured. "The veranda is open ground. Let him be." She quietly stepped back, closed the door, and slid the bolt into place. Then, kneeling beside her bed, she whispered a short prayer, not just for her safety, but for the stranger outside her home. "God, keep us safe tonight. And if he means no harm, give him peace too." As she lay down, her ears strained for any sound. But all she could hear was a rhythm of rain beginning to fall, soft at first, then harder, splattering against the tin roof. Thunder rolled in the distance. Zena stirred in her sleep. Emma turned toward the window. She could see the faint shape of the man still on the veranda, unmoving. She closed her eyes, though her mind would not rest. Who was he? Where had he come from? Why her house? Outside, lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the stranger's face for a brief moment. Tired, weathered, but peaceful. Then darkness returned. The storm grew stronger, wind howling through the night. Emma hugged her daughter close, whispering again, "Tomorrow will be better." But somewhere deep inside, she knew that tomorrow would not be like any other day. As thunder echoed through the hills, the lamp by her bed flickered and went out, leaving only the sound of rain and the soft breathing of the stranger sleeping on her veranda. Morning broke slowly over Veranda, the sun spilling pale light over the red dirt roads and corrugated rooftops. Bird called from the trees, and the smell of wet earth mixed with smoke from morning fires. Emma woke to the faint warmth of sunlight spilling through her bedroom window. She yawned and stretched, her body still tired from the day before. But something felt different. She noticed immediately. The veranda was empty. The stranger, the man who had slept on her porch, was gone. Her heart skipped a beat. She stepped out carefully, eyes scanning the ground. And then she saw it. A small, tattered scarf, left behind on the veranda floor. It was faded and frayed at the edges, but she recognized the care in how it had been folded before he left. Emma picked it up, her fingers brushing over the rough cloth. A strange warmth rose in her chest, though her mind raced with questions. Who was he? Why had he come here? Why leave this behind? As she carried the scarf inside, she heard voices from the street. Neighbors had begun to gather near her house. "You let a stranger sleep on your veranda," one woman whispered sharply. "What if he had stolen everything?" "I heard he looked dangerous," another muttered. "A man alone at night. Who knows what he might do?" Emma shook her head, forcing herself not to answer. Their words pricked at her, but she refused to let fear control her. She placed the scarf on a chair and called softly to her daughter. "Zena, come here, child." The girl blinked sleep from her eyes and patted over. Emma held out the scarf. "Look at this," she said. "It was left here last night. He didn't steal. He didn't harm us. He only needed to rest." Zena frowned, a little unsure. "Mama, maybe he was a thief." Emma shook her head, smiling softly despite the unease in her chest. "Kindness never wastes away, Zena. Sometimes, helping even strangers is the bravest thing we can do." Her daughter's eyes widened, and she nodded slowly, absorbing the lesson without fully understanding it. Later that morning, Emma opened her small provisions shop. She swept the dust from the floor, arranged bags of maize, beans, and sugar on the shelves, and tried to shake off the lingering unease from the night. As she unpacked a box of tomatoes, a man from the local council approached her. His face was serious, and his voice carried a warning. "Emma, you need to be careful," he said. "There have been thieves in this area. People have reported strangers sneaking into compounds, taking things when no one is watching. Don't leave doors unlocked." Emma nodded, grateful for the warning but still unsettled. She thought of the man who had slept on her veranda. He had seemed weary, honest, almost harmless. And yet, what if the councilman was right? Her mind drifted to the scarf on her chair. The image of it seemed to glow in her mind, as though it were more than just cloth, a symbol, perhaps, of trust given and mercy received. She glanced toward the window and froze. Across the street, a shadow moved, subtle, careful. Someone was watching her. Emma's heart tightened. She had no idea who it was, but the feeling lingered, pressing on her like the weight of the storm clouds that had rolled in the night before. She shook herself, trying to focus on the day. There would be work to do, customers to help, and life to continue. But in the back of her mind, she knew something had shifted. The night visitor was gone, but his presence lingered like a whisper in the morning, quiet, powerful, and full of questions that demanded answers. Emma picked up the scarf once more, holding it close to her heart. She whispered softly, almost to herself, "Perhaps some strangers are sent to teach us what courage and kindness truly mean." And with that, she turned to open her shop fully, unaware that this simple act of mercy would soon weave her life into a story far larger than she could imagine. The sun was high now, beating down on Coranza's dusty streets. Emma had finished arranging goods on the shelves and was wiping her brow when she heard a soft knock at the door. She froze. The voice of her customers echoed faintly from outside, but this knock was deliberate, slow, cautious. "Who could that be?" she murmured, moving toward the door. When she opened it, her breath caught. Standing there was the stranger, the same man who had slept on her veranda the night before. But he was different. Gone was the dust that had clung to him like a second skin. His clothes were cleaner, though simple and worn. His face, though weary, carried an expression of humility, and in his hands, he held the tattered scarf he had left behind. Emma stepped back instinctively, uncertainty and caution warring inside her. I need to apologize," he said quietly. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "For sleeping on your veranda last night. I had nowhere else to go. Please forgive me." Emma studied him. His eyes were honest, and there was no trace of menace, only exhaustion and a hint of sorrow that made her chest ache. "What? Who are you?" she asked softly, unable to hide the curiosity in her voice. "My name is Kofi," he said. "I'm traveling through the town, looking for work. I was recently released from prison. I didn't mean to cause trouble." Emma's lips parted slightly, unsure of what to say. Prison. Her heart skipped. She had heard the rumors that haunted men like him, men judged for a single mistake. Yet here he stood, unthreatening, calm, almost fragile. Kofi continued, "I saw your broken fence as I left. If it's all right, I would like to fix it. I owe you for your kindness last night, letting me sleep without fear." Emma hesitated. Her neighbor's warning still echoed in her mind. Strangers are dangerous. You cannot trust them. But looking at Kofi, she saw more than a stranger. She saw a man who had suffered, a man who carried his past like a heavy cloak. She nodded. "If you can fix it, I would appreciate it." Kofi smiled faintly, almost shyly, and set to work. His hands were skilled and careful, measuring and hammering quietly. Emma watched him, noting how precise and patient he was. There was dignity in the way he moved, a quiet strength that seemed to radiate even in silence. Zena, curious and unafraid, approached. "Mama, why is he here again? Did he sleep outside last night?" Emma gave a soft smile. "Yes, child. He needed help. Sometimes people find themselves in hard places, and we do what we can." Zena peered at Kofi, then tilted her head. "Are you okay?" Kofi paused his work and looked at her. His gaze softened. "Yes, little one. I'm learning to be okay." The simplicity of the exchange made Emma's heart swell. Despite the gossip, despite the fears, a bond was forming. Kofi spoke gently to her daughter, answering questions with patience and kindness, his presence calming rather than alarming. Hours passed, and the fence began to look new again. Kofi worked without complaint, sweat dripping from his brow, the sun casting shadows across his determined face. He worked for gratitude, not reward. Finally, he stepped back, wiping his hands on a rag. The fence stood straight and strong, repaired better than Emma had imagined. He looked at Emma and Zena. There was something unspoken in his eyes, a quiet thankfulness, but also a sadness he did not reveal. "I should go," he said softly. "Thank you for your trust. For everything." Emma nodded. Her heart felt heavy yet strangely full. She realized that this man, this stranger, had entered their lives quietly, yet had already left a mark. As Kofi walked away, he paused at the gate, glancing back one last time. His eyes met Emma's, and for a moment, the world seemed suspended. Gratitude, sorrow, and something almost like hope shimmered in that glance. Then he turned and disappeared down the road, leaving behind a sense of mystery and the knowledge that their lives had changed forever. Emma watched until he was gone, holding Zena's hand tightly. She whispered softly, almost to herself, "Perhaps some strangers are sent to remind us that courage and kindness still exist in the world." And somewhere deep in her chest, she felt the first stirrings of a story that had only just begun, a story of trust, of mercy, and of fate weaving its unseen threads. That night, Emma lay awake, the memory of Kofi's eyes lingering in her mind. The house was silent except for the soft creak of the wind against the walls and the occasional hoot of an owl. Yet, despite the quiet, her mind wandered, to nights long past, to shadows she had tried to forget. Her dreams carried her back 5 years, to the night her husband was taken from her. The memory struck her with painful clarity, the sound of shouts, breaking glass, and the flash of a gun. She remembered standing frozen in the doorway, powerless as the thieves fled into the darkness, leaving her grief and fear behind. In her dream, she was back on that veranda, hearing footsteps approaching again, feeling the same helpless panic. But instead of terror, there was a new presence, a figure stepping forward, calm, protective, as if to shield her from the pain of the past. Emma woke with a start, clutching her chest. Her heart raced, but the fear was different now, tinged with hope. The next morning, the town glowed with soft sunlight, painting the red dust roads golden. Emma dressed quietly, careful not to wake Zena, and stepped out toward the small church at the center of the village. It had been years since she had felt the pull to go there, but something compelled her, perhaps the need to make sense of the uneasy stirrings in her heart. She pushed open the wooden doors and stepped into the cool shade. The smell of incense lingered, mingling with the faint scent of flowers. She knelt briefly, whispering a prayer for courage, for safety, and for understanding. And there, at the back of the church, kneeling alone, was Kofi, his head bowed, hands clasped, and eyes closed in solemn prayer. Emma froze in the doorway, her heart tightening. Rumors from the village surfaced in her mind. As a convict, he once fought someone to death. You shouldn't trust him. She felt the old weight of judgment pressing down, but this time, she did not step back. Instead, she stayed, watching quietly. The congregation slowly arrived, filling the pews, murmuring greetings. Kofi remained on his knees, unmoving, as if carrying a private sorrow only he could bear. Emma's thoughts wandered. How often had people condemned her after her husband's death? How often had whispers followed her, judging her for her solitude, for raising Zena alone, for working her small shop? She understood now. The world was quick to judge, slow to understand. And perhaps Kofi had felt the same burden all his life. Later that day, Emma invited him to help in her shop. Small tasks at first, repairing shelves, sweeping the floor, carrying supplies from the storeroom. The town buzzed with gossip, whispers curling like smoke around her. She's letting a convict work for her. Doesn't she know what he did? But Emma ignored them. She saw the skill in Kofi's hands, the care in his work, the quiet dignity he carried even in the shadow of his past. With each shelf fixed, each bag lifted, a silent trust grew between them. Zena, curious and unafraid, watched him work. "He's very gentle," she whispered one afternoon, handing him a bucket of water. Kofi smiled softly, nodding at her. Sometimes the hardest times make us stronger. We just have to keep moving forward. Emma felt a surge of respect and gratitude. This man, a stranger just days ago, had entered their lives carrying his own pain, and yet he gave them peace, stability, and quiet strength. The afternoon light spilled through the windows, catching dust motes floating in the air. Emma glanced at Kofi, noticing the slight slump in his shoulders, the way his eyes avoided the town's gaze. She understood then that trust was fragile, for both of them. She picked up the tattered scarf he had left behind, now folded neatly on a shelf, and whispered, "Perhaps the world has given you as many shadows as it has given me. But maybe, together, we can step into the light." That evening, as the sun sank behind the hills, the air felt heavy with promise. Emma had learned something profound. Judgment could be wrong, fear could mislead, and sometimes the people who seem dangerous carry the greatest gifts of courage and kindness. She didn't know what the future held, but one truth was clear. Kofi's presence, and her own willingness to trust, had begun to heal wounds long thought permanent. And somewhere deep inside, she felt the stirrings of hope, connection, and change that would soon shape the days to come. The day had been hot, the sun relentless over Coranza's red earth. Emma had closed her small provision shop early, sensing the distant rumble of clouds gathering beyond the hills. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves of the mango trees, carrying with it the sharp scent of rain. Inside the shop, Emma secured the last crates of maize and sugar. Her hands moved quickly, a practiced rhythm, but her mind kept wandering to Kofi. He had stayed later than usual that day, helping her organize the supplies and clean the floor. His quiet presence had become a comfort, though a shadow of unease lingered, the stories, the rumors, and the warning from the councilman still echoing in her mind. The first heavy drops of rain struck the roof with sharp, hollow thuds. Emma glanced toward the veranda and saw Kofi, wiping sweat and rain from his brow, helping her carry the heavier crates inside. I can manage the rest, she said, but Kofi shook his head. Let me help. It's better if we finish together. Emma nodded reluctantly, grateful for the help but feeling a twinge of worry. Lightning streaked across the sky, illuminating the compound for a brief instant. And then, from the shadows beyond the fence, two figures appeared, masked and moving with deliberate menace. Emma's heart froze. Memories of her husband's death, of that night when thieves had taken everything, surged back with terrifying clarity. "Give us the money," one of them shouted, his voice harsh and commanding. "Now!" Xena screamed from behind her, her small body trembling. Emma tried to reach her, but her feet felt rooted to the ground, paralyzed by fear. Kofi stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. There was no hesitation in his movements, no faltering. He positioned himself between the thieves and Emma, his hands steady, his stance protective. "Leave her," Kofi said calmly, though his muscles tensed. "You won't take anything." The first man lunged, swinging a crowbar. Kofi caught his arm, twisting it sharply. A scuffle erupted. The second man advanced toward Emma, who shrank back, trying to stay out of the chaos. Rain fell harder now, soaking everyone, turning the dirt into slick, slippery mud. Emma's breath came in short, panicked gasps. She watched helplessly as Kofi fought, his movements precise, desperate, but full of courage. Despite being outnumbered, he held his ground, protecting her and Xena with every ounce of strength. Lightning flashed again, and in that brief illumination, Emma saw the look on Kofi's face, determination mixed with pain. He had been through so much, yet here he was, willing to risk everything for strangers who had done nothing but show him mercy. Finally, a loud crack split the night. A branch had fallen nearby, startling the thieves. Kofi took advantage, striking the first man decisively. The second hesitated, giving Kofi the opening he needed. Within moments, both men had been overpowered. Emma ran to Kofi, clutching his shoulders, fear and relief battling in her chest. "Are you hurt?" she cried. A thin line of blood ran down Kofi's arm, but he smiled faintly, grimacing only slightly. "I'm fine," he said, his voice low but steady. "You're safe. That's what matters." The distant wail of sirens announced the arrival of the police. The thieves, battered and soaked, were quickly apprehended. The storm began to ease, rain softening into a gentle patter as though the heavens themselves were sighing in relief. Alma helped Kofi inside, tending to his wounds with trembling hands. Xena clung to her mother, still shivering from fright, while the older woman whispered reassurances that felt fragile even to herself. Alma's eyes met Kofi's, and she saw not just the man who had risked his life, but the courage and selflessness that defined him. Her voice trembled as she said, "You saved my life, our lives." Kofi's gaze softened. He reached out, brushing her hand gently. "You saved mine first," he replied, "when you didn't chase me away last night." The storm outside faded into the distance, leaving only the sound of dripping water and the heavy, quiet breaths of those who had faced danger and survived. But in that stillness, something stronger emerged: trust, respect, and the fragile beginnings of hope. The sun rose slowly over Carranza, its golden light spilling across the damp earth and the puddles left by last night's storm. Birds chirped hesitantly, as though testing the day, and the air carried the scent of rain-soaked soil and freshly blossomed flowers. Alma moved carefully around her compound, still feeling the echo of fear from the storm. Her hands trembled slightly, though not from exhaustion alone. The memory of masked faces, the sharp swing of a crowbar, and Kofi standing between danger and her family still weighed heavily in her chest. Kofi sat on the wooden bench outside, his arm bandaged and his shirt damp, still showing the marks of the night's struggle. He was quiet, staring at the ground, lost in thought. The rain had washed much of the dirt from his clothes, but the shadow of the fight lingered in his posture. Alma approached slowly, kneeling beside him. Her hands hovered over the wound, unsure whether to touch or simply be present. Her voice shook. "You saved my life? Our lives," she said softly. I don't know how I can ever repay you. Kofi lifted his eyes to hers, a faint smile brushing his lips. You saved mine first, he said quietly, by letting me sleep on your veranda, by trusting me when you didn't have to. That gave me a chance I didn't know I deserved. Alma's eyes filled with tears. She reached out and touched his hand gently, feeling the warmth and strength beneath the rough skin. The enormity of what had happened last night, the danger, the courage, the mercy, pressed on her, and yet she also felt a strange lightness. For the first time in years, she felt that trust could be returned, and kindness could survive even the darkest nights. Across the compound, Zena peeked out from behind the door. Her eyes were wide, a mixture of awe and relief. She had witnessed fear, chaos, and bravery all in one night, and in the safety of dawn, she could finally process it. Neighbors began to gather quietly outside, murmuring among themselves. The same people who had whispered about strangers and danger now stared in disbelief, seeing that it was the man they had feared who had risked his life for Alma and Zena. He fought them off? One whispered. Yes, another replied. The stranger, he saved them. Alma noticed the shift in their eyes, the judgment replaced by awe, the fear replaced by respect. But she also saw the quiet pain in Kofi's gaze. Even with praise and admiration, he still carried the weight of being an outsider, of having a past that the town could not easily forget. Alma brushed her fingers over his hand again. Perhaps one day, people will see who you really are, she said softly. Not the mistakes of the past, but the courage of today. Kofi nodded, his expression unreadable, but a small spark of gratitude flickered in his eyes. In that moment, words were unnecessary. They had faced danger together, and something unspoken had formed between them. Trust, respect, and a bond stronger than fear or gossip. As the sun rose higher, casting golden light across the wet earth, Alma helped Kofi to his feet. The storm had passed, but its mark remained, a memory of bravery, of mercy, and of lives touched forever. For Alma, Kofi, and Zena, the morning brought relief and gratitude, but it also brought the quiet understanding that life could change in a single night, and that sometimes the people we least expect become our protectors, our teachers, and our hope. And somewhere deep inside, Alma felt a gentle truth take root, that trust and kindness, once given, could never truly be lost. The days that followed the storm were quiet, yet full of change. The sun rose over in Carranza, casting warm light on the red earth, and life slowly returned to its familiar rhythm. But for Alma, Zena, and Kofi, nothing would ever be the same. Kofi's wound had begun to heal, though a faint scar would remain, a reminder of the night he had risked his life for strangers. Alma insisted on tending to it herself, her hands gentle, her touch steady. She moved with care, a silent gratitude flowing through every gesture. You don't need to thank me, Kofi said one morning, his voice low but firm. I did what anyone should do, anyone who could. Alma shook her head. No, she said, not anyone. You chose to act when others might have run. You saved us, and that deserves recognition, not just from me, but from everyone. For the first time, Alma offered Kofi steady work at her shop. Small tasks became larger ones, repairing shelves, organizing supplies, and eventually helping customers. He moved with quiet dignity, always humble, always careful. Even Zena, who had been shy around strangers, began to see him as a father figure, laughing at his gentle jokes and seeking his advice on small tasks. Word of Kofi's bravery had spread. Neighbors, once suspicious and whispering, now looked at him with respect. Children waved, shopkeepers nodded, and even those who had doubted him in the past began to acknowledge the courage he had shown. Yet Kofi remained modest, never boasting, never seeking praise. One afternoon, Alma visited the local police station, curiosity and hope mingling in her chest. She learned that one of the thieves apprehended during the storm had confessed to multiple other crimes in the surrounding towns. The revelation cleared the last shadow of suspicion surrounding Kofi. The truth about his past was finally coming to light. Alma felt a surge of relief and determination. She joined a local justice group to help clear Kofi's name fully, ensuring the town knew the truth, that he had been wrongly accused years ago and that his character, actions, and courage spoke louder than old rumors. Returning home, Alma found Kofi tending to the shelves with quiet concentration. She paused for a moment, watching him. The same man who had appeared on her veranda, tired and worn, had transformed, not only in the eyes of the town, but in his own life. "Kofi," she said softly. He looked up, curiosity flickering in his tired eyes. "The town will see the truth now," she continued. "Your courage, your integrity, people will know who you really are." He nodded slowly, a quiet smile touching his lips. "I never sought recognition," he said. "I only wanted a chance to prove that people are more than their past." Alma placed a hand on his shoulder. "And you have. You've shown us that even in darkness, kindness and bravery can shine." Days turned into weeks. Zena's laughter returned to the house, ringing like music through the small compound. Alma felt lighter, freer, her heart filled with gratitude for the man who had entered their lives so quietly yet profoundly. Kofi worked diligently, but his quiet sorrow lingered like a shadow behind the light of his courage. Even with the town beginning to understand him, he remained humble, aware of the journey he had traveled, the mistakes he had been wrongly blamed for, and the mercy that had allowed him to start again. Alma realized something powerful. Redemption was not just about clearing one's name. It was about trust, courage, and a willingness of others to believe in the good within us. She had been given that chance herself, and now she was helping Kofi receive the same gift. And as the sun dipped below the hills each evening, Alma, Zena, and Kofi shared small, quiet moments. Laughter over a repaired shelf, stories exchanged across the table, and silent understanding in each glance. Life, once fractured by fear and mistrust, was slowly being rebuilt with care, courage, and hope. The past had been heavy, the storms fierce, but redemption had arrived. Not just for Kofi, but for everyone whose lives had been touched by mercy, trust, and the power of a second chance. The morning was soft and still, the kind of quiet that carries both hope and farewell. Sunlight spilled across Carranza, painting the red dirt roads golden and warming the veranda where Alma stood, holding the tattered scarf that Kofi had left behind on that first night. She had washed it, folded it neatly, and now it felt heavier with meaning than mere cloth could ever carry. Kofi approached, his pace slow, deliberate. His bag rested over one shoulder, his eyes focused on the ground, but flicking occasionally toward the house and the two women who had become his new family. Alma held out the scarf. "Take this," she said softly. "It's yours, and yet it belongs to both of us." Kofi stopped. His eyes lifted, meeting hers, and for the first time his voice trembled slightly. "Why?" he asked quietly. Alma smiled gently, a mixture of pride, gratitude, and sadness in her gaze. "Some people come into our lives by accident," she said, "but some are sent to remind us that kindness returns. That mercy can change everything." Kofi's eyes softened. He took the scarf, brushing his fingers over the worn fabric as if touching a memory rather than cloth. The weight of the last days, the storm, the danger, the whispered rumors, the trust, all seemed to gather in that small, fragile piece of fabric. He looked away briefly, then back at Alma. I need to tell you something," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The night I slept on your veranda, I had been praying for a second chance. I didn't know if anyone would help me, if anyone would trust me again. And then I saw your light. You're home, and I knew, somehow, that maybe this was my chance." Alma's eyes glistened with tears. She stepped closer. "You earned this chance, Kofi, not by being perfect, not by hiding your past, but by showing courage, humility, and heart. That is what matters." Kofi swallowed, emotion rising. He glanced at Zena, who was peeking shyly from behind Alma. She smiled at him, unafraid, her small hand holding her mother's. And in that simple gesture, Kofi felt a warmth he had never allowed himself to feel before. A family, in the quietest sense of the word. He lifted the scarf, pressing it gently to his chest. "I will never forget this," he said. "Never forget what you and your daughter have done for me. The trust, the kindness, the life you helped me rebuild." Amma placed a hand on his shoulder, firm and steady. "And you will never forget to carry that light forward, Kofi. Let it guide you wherever you go." For a moment, they stood in silence, the morning sun glinting off the veranda's wooden beams, a soft breeze stirring the folds of the scarf. Then Kofi turned, taking the first steps. Down the red dirt road. Each step was deliberate, measured, carrying the weight of his past and the hope of a future he had earned. Amma and Zena watched from the veranda, hearts full yet heavy. The place where fear and mercy had first met now became the threshold of new beginnings. The camera of their memory lingered on the scarf as it fluttered gently in the morning breeze, a symbol of compassion, trust, and destiny intertwined. It was a reminder that the smallest acts, a light left on, a hand extended, a stranger welcomed, could ripple through lives in ways no one could predict. Kofi walked steadily down the road, the horizon stretching wide before him. Behind him, the village moved on, life continuing as it always had. But for Amma, Zena, and Kofi, the world had shifted subtly, forever altered by mercy, courage, and the quiet power of redemption. As he disappeared into the distance, Amma whispered softly to Zena, "Sometimes, the people we least expect are sent to show us who we can truly become." And in the gentle rise of the sun, in the soft flutter of a scarf, and in the lingering echo of courage, their story reached its quiet, luminous conclusion.